wonderful speaker that I want to present to you because it's one of my favorite companies. As I told you, my name is Tracy Hoyos Lopez. I am the head of strategic initiatives for Kraken Institutional. And today I am presenting, or right now I'm presenting Bradley Duke, who's the head of Europe Bitwise. Reason I'm very excited about this is because Bitwise and Kraken have a wonderful product that we work together in a partnership which generates yield. So please help me in welcoming Bradley Duke, who is the head of Europe at Bitwise Asset Management. He's a builder of Europe's largest Bitcoin ETPs and institutional adoption leader with a career spanning regulated financial services at Jefferies and KCG, plus blockchain strategy studies at Oxford's Saïd Business School. Bradley bridges traditional finance and digital assets. He now leads Bitwise's European expansion, focusing on institutional Bitcoin and crypto adoption. And this panel is Bitcoin Beyond the Institutional Bid, what the conflict in Iran has taught us about the future of Bitcoin. Please give him a warm welcome.
Hello everyone. My name is Bradley Duke from Bitwise, and yeah, thanks for coming today. So just, hold on, wait, this thing is not working. It's going backwards, but not forwards. There we go. No? There we go. All right, so just a little bit about Bitwise before we get going. Bitwise is an institutional-only, a digital assets-only asset manager. We produce products that give retail and institutional investors exposure to cryptocurrencies. We have a range of crypto ETPs here in Europe, ETFs in the US, and we have other businesses as well. We have a staking business, on-chain solutions business, a yield business, as was just mentioned, and we have around 15 billion in client assets, dollars, and a team of over 200. I am lucky enough to sit on the board of executives at Bitwise, and I run the business in Europe, which is very interesting and exciting for me. The great thing about Bitwise is really the people behind it. There's some fantastic names, investors in there, including Henry Kravis, Stanley Druckenmiller, Alison Davis, who's actually sits on our board, and some great VCs, including Electric Capital, Highland Capital Partners, and Kostler Ventures, just to name a few. All right, so in today's discussion, I'm actually going to stay on this slide for quite a while because this is a really interesting thing that happened, right? So we are looking here at how Bitcoin has performed since the beginning of the Iran conflict, and we're going to be looking at what this has taught us about Bitcoin and about the future of Bitcoin. So as you can see from this slide, and it may be a little bit small, but I'll give you the highlights of it. So Bitcoin, since it was the 28th of February when the Iran conflicts began, and Bitcoin has risen around 25% since the beginning of the conflict, and gold has fallen about 12.5% since then, and the NASDAQ 100 is up 12.5%, and the S&P is around 7.5%. Of course, this changes every day. But it's quite interesting because for a long time, of course, gold was outperforming Bitcoin for a lot of last year, and it's quite a shift. And we started to think, like at Bitwise, our research team started to think, what is behind that? What is going on with Bitcoin, and why has it all of a sudden started to climb again? And so the thesis goes something like this. We see there's basically two main buckets for the reasons that people invest in Bitcoin. The first is they see it as an alternative store of value, okay, to gold, to their fiat portfolio, and this has been increasing as Bitcoin adoption has grown, and so they're betting on Bitcoin for that reason. They see it as a store of value, an alternative store of value to the alternatives that are out there. And then the second reason people invest in Bitcoin, and this is we're talking about investments here, we're not talking about Bitcoin in general, the whole social upliftment, which is, there's a whole beautiful side to Bitcoin, but we focus today just on investment thesis. And the second reason people invest in Bitcoin is because they think that one day it's going to increasingly become a medium for international payments, for international exchange. And that component we see as a type of call option, an out-of-the-money call option, okay? That this is the bet that people are taking. They are saying that they expect it's going to go, that it's going to go up, it's going to, in future, be higher. And the thinking is, and then when you think about options, what are the things that causes the option to rise in value? There are two things that happened. One is that if people think that, first is volatility. If there's increased volatility, the option increases in value. The second, and that's exactly what has happened. There's been international, the instability that was initiated around this war, this conflict in Iran, has created international volatility, instability, and that has helped the price of Bitcoin. The second component is whether it's likely that the option is actually going to rise above its strike price, that it's going to be in the money, and it's going to be, that as that likelihood goes up, the value of that option goes up. And so we had something really interesting happen during this conflict, and it was a couple of weeks ago, and this happened, right? Iran demanded a toll in Bitcoin to allow ships to pass through the Straits of Hormuz. And it was everywhere in the newspaper. A lot of the Bitcoin haters came out and said, well, this is just true to form. Bitcoin is only used for nefarious purposes. But at Bitwise, we looked at that and we thought, actually, this is super interesting, okay? Because one of the attributes of Bitcoin that isn't actually spoken about that much, but is probably one of the most important, is the fact that it is not associated with any nation state, country, person, or company, okay? That its neutrality is paramount, and it's the only other asset that's truly neutral like that. You could argue others, but the other big one is of course gold, but Bitcoin is a better version of gold, and so so it doesn't matter what you think about the regime in Iran, okay, or the fact that they were extorting money by basically saying we'll go blow up your ships unless you pay this Bitcoin. The fact was they chose a censorship-resistant means of payment, of international payment, okay? And actually, if you support Bitcoin, you can't, it's Bitcoin for everybody. It's got Bitcoin for everyone, regardless of their political leanings, whether you agree with their politics or not. It is this trustless environment that people can use to transact, even if they don't agree with each other, which is not the case with the US dollar. As we know, at the beginning of the Ukraine war, the Russian banks were removed from the SWIFT payment system, okay? And that caused this acceleration in de-dollarization because effectively the US dollar had been weaponized. And so then countries around the world took notice of the fact that now their USD assets could be captured, could be seized, they could be cut off their means of settlement, and so started to look for alternatives. As a result, we saw the yuan ruble currency pair trading just skyrocket, and it's been up ever since. All this to say that this is now increasing the value of this call option, Bitcoin, because it is now it's shown that this is a legitimate way of making international payments, that even where there's high stakes, where countries are not at peace with each other, that Bitcoin is a way of making international payments and settlements, even if it isn't the one that the ideal case for this payment. So just getting back to just a more general discussion around Bitcoin and what's been going on. You know, we look always at the seasonality of Bitcoin, and historically, it's been that April has been the up there with November in terms of the best month in terms of price performance of Bitcoin, and this it's been a really interesting year this year, because we have seen, and I'll go into some other slides, but we've seen the rise of this institutional bid of the corporate buyer of Bitcoin through corporate treasury companies and similar, really supporting the bid, being the buyer in a time since October 10th last year, when there's been a lot of selling pressure. And this institutional buyer has stayed in and has grown really significantly. It feels like this year, this chart is more likely to, the seasonality is more likely to play itself out. You can see that June, July, August, September, it falls and bottoms out, and that's just simply because of, you know, the sell and may go away kind of mentality that's throughout the investment cycles that the investment community, so that people can enjoy their summer holiday. Yeah, so I'm not going to stay too long on this, but there is the discussion about, you know, the oil price shocks have historically been associated with U.S. recessions, but this is actually it's too long a conversation for the time allotted, so I'm going to move on. And this is something that's been happening and changing in February this year, and that is the crypto asset sentiment index, the sentiment towards Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies has recovered. Especially if you look, especially on that right-hand chart there, you can see this trend upwards. It's been very clear and moving for the first time into positive territory since back in October last year, when there was the 10-10 sell-off that happened, and it sent sentiment through the floor. So sentiment is back. The bulls are coming back, and we're starting to feel it. So this chart is actually showing that absolute valuations have really kind of bottomed out, have been at the low points that we've seen in previous cycles, and it's now actually on its way up. So it does feel like a very good time to be buying Bitcoin, in particular in terms of those people who are interested in timing the cycles. And what we've seen actually is that since February, there has been a re-acceleration in institutional demand. This has been particularly pronounced with the treasury companies, the Bitcoin treasury companies like Strategy and others. And this has been particularly pronounced in the last month. So in the last month, until the beginning of May, the first few days of May, there was 92,000 Bitcoin were purchased by these treasury companies. 2/3 of that was Strategy. And that, if you think about what the new supply of Bitcoin is every month, it's around 12.7 thousand Bitcoin. So at 92,000, that's more than 7x the new supply that's being soaked up by these treasury. And that's before we've looked at any other type of investor, including ETPs and ETFs globally. And so it's just these treasury companies that are soaking up. And so this has been the main driver behind the acceleration that we've seen, along with the thesis that what we spoke about earlier around why people are interested in buy Bitcoin. On the chart on the right, you can see the new supply. It's at that kind of like sort of pale blue line across the bottom. It's fixed, so that's why it kind of stays the same. That's the new supply, and then the net institutional demand is the line, the curve line, which includes both global ETPs and treasury companies. you can see actually that global ETPs in periods of stress, there's a sell-off. People sell. They sell. These are liquid assets, but the treasury companies have kept buying. They've maybe slowed down or stopped buying certain periods, but they don't sell. And this is really interesting for people who are looking at the future of Bitcoin, because I can tell you when I first got into Bitcoin and crypto investment products back in 2018, 2019, when we started our company, we were not thinking about Bitcoin treasury companies. We knew corporates would be buyers at some day, but never at this level. And so this is a phenomenon we had not planned for, which is really interesting and invigorates the market. All right, just a couple more slides on this institutional bid. It really has mitigated the selling pressure that we've seen over the last few months. You can see since 2024, the institutional demand, which we categorize as investments in treasury companies buying Bitcoin, and also crypto ETP issuers buying Bitcoin because they have to back the paper that's being issued. You can see that it far outstripped the new supply, which is the bluer of the two bars, and that happened in 2024. It happened in 2025, and it's happening again in 2026. Still early days. We're in the 5th month now, and yes, it is slower than it was last year, but it's starting to re-accelerate, especially in this last month, as we've seen. And the reason why that supply is kind of like going down is because there was a halving, and as a result, there's through those years, there's a kind of it's not a straight line in terms of the supply. It straddles the calendar year. Usually, it's around May or April, May that the halving takes place. Yeah. So how are we doing for time? We're doing okay. So yeah, and the chart on the right is really just talking about the institutional demand versus the realized cap change, so the market cap in total, and we can see that after a period of quite a lot of stress, it's the realized cap changes is returning. Okay, these two charts here. The left-hand one shows corporate purchases of versus new supply. So that's Bitcoin treasury company strategy, Capital B, and the like, Metaplanet, many others, and you can see that this is the new supply. It actually hasn't been. I think the date of this is it's fairly new, but it's even higher than that now. Since this chart was made on the 4th of May the 4th, and on the right-hand side you can see historically ETF flows also outstripped the new supply on their own. That's what the last year and the year before they outstripped new supply, but that hasn't been the case. And you could ask why, and that's there's been a lot of bearishness. There's been a lot of people who've sold Bitcoin who haven't had diamond fingers, and it's not just the selling of Bitcoin itself, the token, but also the ETPs. Some people have lost faith. They weren't prepared to take the short-term pain and have sold. So the net inflows have been down. But I expect that as the year progresses, that number is going to go down. So this chart, and I think this is the last chart for today. On the left, it's a really interesting chart for me because MicroStrategy, or Strategy as they now called, started buying Bitcoin in, I think it was August 2020. Okay, way before anybody else did, on an institutional at that level, and they were for the longest time the largest single holder of Bitcoin until the advent of the US Bitcoin ETF, and then IBIT, which is the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. Came up and overtook it, and just a few months after it was launched, it became the largest single holder. Of course, the shareholders are actually the owners ultimately, but that's the single holder of the Bitcoin as a corporation, and until recently it remained the largest holder. But what's happened now is is very recently, strategy continued to buy Bitcoin and has now outstripped. And those charts that you saw before, seeing with the relative to the new supply, shows why it is now the largest holder. And institutions are now 13% of the total Bitcoin supply. And that you can see on the right-hand side, the chart shows the darker part is the Bitcoin ETPs, and the lighter part includes the public companies. And you can see the ETPs have kind of plateaued, they've flattened out a bit, whereas the public companies are continuing to rise. And so, of course, this chart has got to change and evolve as market conditions change. When the bulls come back into the ETPs, of course, will continue to rise, along with the price of Bitcoin as they have historically. So I hope you found this interesting. If you've got any questions, I'm going to be hanging around, so please come and ask me and talk. Happy to answer any questions. I've got 12 seconds left, so thank you very much for listening today.